Objects define wars. The First World War was defined by the machine gun, artillery piece, biplane, and the U-boat. The aircraft carrier, battleship, and tank would serve to characterize World War II. These objects defined these wars, but they were born of a strategy that was shaped by oceans, trenches, and the large battlefields of Europe. In the same way, the helicopter, more specifically the Huey helicopter, would epitomize the Vietnam War. The Huey would revolutionize the way warfare was conducted. The landscape and enemy in Vietnam would make it a different kind of war. The large battlefields and stand and fight tactics of the first half of the 20th century would have little relevance in the jungles, rice paddies, and the mountains of Vietnam. The battle would have to be taken to the enemy, and an efficient way into and out of battle was needed. Early American conflicts had the horse. Vietnam had the Huey helicopter. According to Vietnam veteran and founder of the Vietnam Memorial, Jan Shrugs, the Korean War would show the necessity of the helicopter in modern warfare. Helicopters in Korea saved countless lives by evacuating wounded from the battlefield to MASH units in the rear areas. After Korea, the U.S. Army wanted to develop a faster, more powerful troop-carrying helicopter that could carry more troops to the battlefield and evacuate larger numbers of wounded to the hospitals. To develop this important reform in mobilized warfare, the Army turned to Bell Helicopter to develop a turbine engine helicopter that would fulfill the needs envisioned in future conflicts. The first turbine engine Bell helicopter flew was in 1954. The U.S. Army was impressed and awarded Bell a contract to develop a new generation of turbine-powered helicopters that would not just have medevac capabilities, but also serve the role of transporting fully armed troops into battle. In 1956, Bell developed the UHIA, and the Huey helicopter was born. Originally, the helicopter was designated HUIA, and thus the nickname Huey. It was a name that would stick. Bell continued to improve on the UHIA design, and with the development of the UHID Huey, the Army had a helicopter that could transport up to 12 fully armed men to the battlefield with the speed and efficiency it desired. The Huey would prove to be a formidable weapon and an invaluable lifeline. The Huey would first see combat in Vietnam during 1962. After initial use as a medevac helicopter, the Army wanted to devise a strategy for using the Huey to take the war to the Viet Cong and the NVA. In a conflict with no front lines and fast and furious skirmish, a plan was needed to use the Huey for waging this kind of war. The development of the Huey had already revolutionized warfare. A new revolutionary strategy was needed to use the Huey to its full potential in the jungle warfare. The Army would turn to the 1st Air Cavalry and the 101st Airborne Division. It would be their job to reform the Army's previous helicopter strategy of a strictly medevac use and develop advanced tactics for helicopter transport, assault, and counterinsurgency warfare. The 1st Air Cavalry would turn to Colonel Hal Moore to prepare his men for a major battle with the North Vietnamese. Hal Moore knew that the Huey would be his lifeline when the bullets started flying. He turned to Major Bruce Crandall to help coordinate training between the 1st Cav troopers and the helicopter pilots. Crandall would command the 229th Assault Helicopter Battalion, 1st Cavalry Division Air Mobile. The baptism and fire for the Huey and the 1st Cav would be the battles of Ia Drang Valley in South Vietnam. The tactics and strategies developed by Colonel Moore and Major Crandall would be tested on November 14, 1965, when Crandall led the 1st Major Division operation of air mobile troops into Landing Zone X-Ray. For his actions during the battle, Crandall would receive the Medal of Honor. Major Crandall, his crew, and the other Hueys would keep flying for 22 straight missions of relief. Major Crandall's Huey would evacuate 70 wounded comrades and would keep flying in ammunition that Colonel Hal Moore's men would need to fight off a number of superior NVA force. When asked about the role of the Huey in the Ia Drang Valley battle, Major Crandall said, "I knew the success of the mission would be in the hands of the helicopter. You have to understand, The only transportation ground troops had for supplies, water, ammo, and food were helicopters. Crandall would go on to say, the helicopter was the primary weapon and tool throughout the Vietnam War. Major Crandall did not exaggerate the importance of the Huey. It was involved in almost every battle and skirmish of the war. It provided transportation to and from the field. It brought in supplies, provided cover fire in a hot LZ, and evacuated the wounded.
My name is Ed Freeman, and all I ever wanted to be was a good soldier.
For what he did that day, Ed Freeman was awarded the Medal of Honor in 2001. Now, that same honor is given to Bruce Crandall.
My name is Bruce Crandall, and I believe in duty, honor, and country.
Crandall and Freeman have been friends for 50 years. Just don't ask them who's the better pilot.
I am
Oh, no.
the best helicopter pilot.
We might have been after I retired.
Retire? They didn't even think they'd live out the day. All they knew was that despite the intense fire, they were going back to that closed LZ to save their friends.
November 14th was when everybody knew, hey, this beats horses.
That day in '65, that Huey was the greatest invention known to mankind, particularly that kid that either needed ammo or water coming into the LZ or needed a ride coming out of the LZ.
The Huey was one tough bird.
Quite tough bird. Wonderful to fly. What we didn't know in 1965 is how well would it hold up to ground fire. And we found out it was wonderful.
The courage and effectiveness of the Huey helicopter, their pilots, and crews is supported in those key facts. According to the Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association, 7,013 Hueys flew in Vietnam. 1,074 Huey pilots were killed, and 3,305 Hueys were destroyed during the war. During the war, up to 900,000 wounded men were medically evacuated by Huey helicopters. As a result, 98% of the wounded who did not die in the first 24 hours survived. The Huey helicopter totaled more than 7,531,000 flight hours in Vietnam. The Huey truly was the workhorse of the war, and more importantly, its reputation as the lifeline for the ground troops was justly earned. One of the ending images of the Vietnam War is the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. The last evacuees climbed into the Huey as it hovered above the roof. It was a fitting end to the use of the Huey in Vietnam. The Huey was instrumental in the first major victory of the war, performed heroically throughout the war, and was now being used for the last display of selfless courage of the war. As the North Vietnam overran Saigon and South Vietnam fell to the communists, the Huey defined the Vietnam War, shaped the war, and saved the lives of countless warriors.